Let's start with a belief that's as common as it is corrosive. Most teams operate under the assumption that their narrative has to constantly change just to stay relevant.
But that's just rarely true. In fact, acting on that belief usually points to a fundamental misunderstanding of what a narrative is supposed to do in the first place. You see, the problem is almost never the core story. What usually needs to adapt is the surface, how that story is expressed, not its fundamental meaning. The core has to stay put. When you confuse those two things, and most teams do, you create a really dangerous problem: narrative drift. And that drift has serious consequences for the entire organization. To really get why, we need to completely reframe our thinking. So stop seeing your narrative as marketing content. Start seeing it as what it is: infrastructure. Its primary job is to preserve meaning across a very complex system. I mean, the entire point of having a locked narrative is to make sure the organization speaks with one voice. It's about operating from a single, unified logic. It is the architecture for coherence. Let's get really precise about this. Narrative infrastructure is the stable underlying logic that ensures meaning is preserved across every single expression of the company. That means product, sales, marketing, everything. And this is where the real cost shows up. When this infrastructure is unstable, when that core narrative shifts around too much, organizational alignment just decays. It creates all this internal friction and it erodes efficiency way faster than most leaders ever realize. Okay, so if the narrative is infrastructure, it has to have a stable foundation. Let's dig into the part that absolutely must remain invariant: the unchanging core. These are the non-negotiables. First, the definition of the core problem you exist to solve. Second, your value logic, how you uniquely solve it. Third, the trade-offs you have explicitly accepted. And fourth, and this is just as important, the audience you consciously exclude. These four elements are bedrock. And let's be really clear about this. If these elements change, you're not evolving your narrative. What you're experiencing is meaning loss. The semantic core has been compromised and the whole system starts to break down. Now, this doesn't mean the narrative is brittle. Actually, it's the opposite. Stability at the core is what enables flexibility at the surface. So let's look at that flexible surface, because this is where adaptation is not only safe, it's absolutely necessary.
So these are the elements that you can and you should adjust. You can absolutely change the emphasis for a specific audience. You can alter the ordering of your points. You can adjust the language density, make it simpler or more technical. And of course, you can change the contextual framing to make it relevant to a specific moment or market.
So the crucial distinction is this: adaptation is about the how, the mechanics of how your core meaning travels. It's about translation fidelity. The core, on the other hand, is invariant. It is the what that meaning actually is. That distinction, it matters. In fact, it's the central discipline of effective product marketing once your positioning is locked. So now we can use this framework as a tool. When you start to see narrative drift happening, don't just treat the symptom. Use it as a diagnostic to uncover unresolved strategic decisions. Teams that are in trouble often ask this question: is our story getting stale? They feel this pressure to refresh the messaging. This is the wrong question, entirely. That impulse to change the story is almost always a sign of a deeper, more uncomfortable issue. The narrative isn't the problem, it's the signal. See, narrative drift is a high-fidelity signal of an unresolved truth in the business. It means a foundational decision about the core, the problem, the value, the trade-offs, or the audience has become unstable. So the correct question isn't, what should we say next? It's this: what decision hasn't actually settled? Has our view of the core problem shifted? Or are we second-guessing our value logic? That's where the real work needs to happen. Okay, let's bring this all together. Strong, effective narratives don't change often. They're built on a stable core that allows them to adapt constantly at the surface without ever losing their essential meaning. So here they are, the rules of narrative integrity, all in one place. On the left, you see the core elements that must never change. On the right, the surface elements that may, and frankly should, adapt. Think of this as the operating system for maintaining both coherence and relevance. You get this right, and you build a narrative that actually endures. Misunderstanding this one distinction is a primary reason my product marketing so often fails. So in our next explainer, we're going to look at those specific failure modes, how they emerge so quietly, and why they are so predictable.